Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we have a special guest. We have Nellie Aculp from CorpNet, and we're going to be talking about corporate compliance and some of the things that, as an entity, as a business owner, some of the things that you need to make sure that you're doing correctly. And we're also going to talk about, which state do you file in, and various different things about how do you stay compliant as a business owner. What are some of those requirements when you are first opening up an entity? So, Nellie, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excellent. So, we really love kind of the work that CorpNet does. And if you're interested in learning more about them, check out the show notes. We have a link to a blog post that kind of summarizes a lot about what we talk about there, and you can get introduced to their team there. But Nellie, I think to start out is give us this kind of ideas like what is business compliance? So when you're talking about an entity structure you have, what are some of those initial compliance things that keep that entity compliant?
This is a great question, Mike, because a lot of times most people think once they set up a corporation or LLC, it's like their job is done. But that corporation or LLC has to stay in compliance for the lifetime of, throughout the structure of that life cycle of that corporation and LLC, and compliance requirements for that corporation or LLC are required. And those compliance filings can range anywhere from, for a corporation, for example, making sure that corporation has bylaws, making sure that they're having their annual meeting of the board of directors and the shareholders annual meetings timely, and drafting annual meeting minutes. The most important one is making sure once that corporation is filed, to make sure that they know when their initial statement of information or annual statement of information for that corporation is due, and make sure they get it timely filed so that they're not now looking at any type of late fees or penalties. And then some states, they may also be required to pay some sort of a franchise tax fee or a state tax fee. So it really depends on the state that that corporation is being set up in order to know what those compliance or administrative tasks are for that corporation. LLCs are a little less complex, and that's why I like to call the LLC, it's kind of one of those entities where you get to have your cake and eat it too, because the single piece of document that controls that LLC is the LLC's operating agreement, which obviously the members of that LLC should refer to from time to time to make sure if it needs to be updated. Other than that, LLCs are generally required to file an annual report, also referred to as an annual statement of information, if it's required within their state. And then if their state requires a franchise tax, that's another type of compliance requirement. But in general, LLCs are not required to file annual meeting minutes, just because LLCs are a hybrid of a proprietorship and a corporation, so a lot less complex when it comes to administrative tasks, paperwork, and compliance formalities. Now, these are just the basically the internal compliance requirements that are generally referred to when we're talking about compliance as it relates to a corporation or LLC. How we like to break it down is both, with corporations and LLCs, they're both a set of internal requirements that I just laid out, and then there's a bunch of external compliance requirements that LLCs and corporations are generally bound by. And those are, for example, making sure that LLC or corporation has an tax ID number when it becomes a corporation or an LLC, making sure that they're now opening and conducting their finances under a corporate bank account. Another one is, for example, if that corporation or LLC, is intending to do business under any other variation of its legal name that corporation or LLC is filed under within the state, then that corporation or LLC needs to do a doing business as filing. Two other ones is the beneficial ownership information report that has become a mandatory kind of mandate by the federal government, FinCEN, which there's ever changing laws within it, but it is now a requirement that needs to be complied with. Other than the fact that, the latest is that, well, if you don't file, they're not going to penalize you for it. And then last but not least, for example, if that corporation or LLC intends to be hiring employees and planning on, for example, paying those employees through a paycheck, there needs to be those payroll tax accounts that are set up. If that LLC or corporation is intending to charge a tax, there's going to need to be sales tax accounts that are set up. So there is an ongoing list. We have a checklist here at CorpNet that, it's downloadable and you can go down and check it off to make sure that, the corporation or LLC is in compliance for that year and the years to come.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that, it's a lot of these little things that you might not necessarily, you get something in the mail, you might miss it, you don't pay attention to it, or you think that, oh, I don't need to do anything here because my accountant handles that, or whatever it might be. And, I don't know how many entities we've looked up at the state level and, we're bringing on a new client or reviewing something or want to change who's, the company's registered under, and you bring it up to state level and it says, oh, it's an inactive company, or they're starting to sign like kind of a big agreement. And the person they're signing the agreement with says, well, your company's listed as inactive on the state level. And they're like, how could that be? And it's just like those little things that are missed. And I think that that's important to remember, is just like have that checklist of what needs to be done and just make sure that we do it. And a lot of the stuff is easy. It's relatively repetitive. And it's just renewing something, making sure the information is still correct. But, having that piece of a checklist to make sure that's being done.
Having that peace of mind that, you've taken the time to form this corporation or LLC to give you that peace of mind, that personal liability asset protection. And then all of a sudden you go to the state side and it's like inactive or in bad standing. So it's funny. I have a very funny story to tell you, is that, us as a company, we had put all of this on our accountant, and for some reason, something, kind of fell through the cracks, and we're a commercial registered agent, which is another compliance requirement that I forgot to list. That's an internal compliance requirement, in addition to the annual meeting minutes and the annual reports, is that a company, specifically a corporation or an LLC, has to designate a registered agent in the state that they're active as a corporation or LLC. And what a registered agent is basically a person over the age of 18 that needs to be designated with a physical address, no PO boxes, no private mailboxes, within the state that corporation or LLC is planning to conduct their business. And the registered agent is the person who accepts service of process, legal documentation, anything that's being served upon that corporation or LLC, and they have to be there during the normal business hours of 8 to 5. And someone like us is a commercial agent, so we have to take the extra steps of filing certain paperwork with the state. And our accountant had failed to renew our annual report, and hence when we went to the state website to check on our good standing, we realized that we were out of bad standing. And when we were out of bad standing, we could not now be acting as a commercial registered agent. So it just caused this domino effect of problems, which at the end of the day, I always recommend, as an accountant representing a ton of clients, or if you're a business owner and you're really focused on, growing that business, as we all know, as an entrepreneur, we have so many things going on, is to have this peace of mind that your corporation or LLC is gonna be intact and not go into bad standing, is, partner up with a firm like ours that can monitor all of these compliance filings for you and give you alerts, in advance as to what is coming up due. Or, for example, if you're the accountant and you have multiple clients, as an accountant, or similar person like you as an accountant or CPA can partner with us and set up yourself with our monitoring portal, whereby we're giving you alerts so that you can send them over to your clients. And this is all in advance, so you're being proactive about it rather than being reactive.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So I have a question that I kind of want to talk about is different mindsets that people have when they open a business. And I'll just kind of list like three main that I see oftentimes is you have a business owner that's starting to, let's say they want to open up an LC and they say, well, I can just go to the state website, pay my $100 fee, apply for an EIN, and I'm done. That entity's set up. Then you have other, business owners that say, well, I'm going to use a service like CorpNet, and they're going to kind of do the filing for me. And then you have others that say, well, I can't do any of that. Like I need to have my attorney draft something, and you're talking about a couple $1,000 fee to open up that entity structure. So, can you kind of walk me through those three mindsets? And when does is there ever a time where mindset number one, where it's just go to the state website, open it up, get an EIN, that's fine? When does it make sense that, yeah, this entity might need an attorney or not need an attorney? So can you kind of walk me through your
Yes.
process when you're looking at or analyzing or talking to a
Sure.
business owner, kind of where you're walking them down that aisle?
Sure. So, simply stated, anyone can form a corporation or an LLC by directly going to the state website and, downloading the forms and, attempting to submit the articles of incorporation for a corporation or an articles of organization for an LLC. So there is no law that prohibits anyone as an entrepreneur to do it on their own. The problem gets down to whether they are taking the necessary steps to ensure all of their, I's are dotted and their T's are crossed. And what I'm talking about here is, for example, have they checked the name to make sure that name is available before they can submit that name as a corporation or LLC? Are they checking to make sure that the proper name is being used along with the proper ending, as we call it, a corporate indicator or an LLC indicator? And at the end of the day, if they don't do this, they run the risk of filing it, having it get rejected, and then having to pay another, filing fee to resubmit and resubmit the filing. So what it boils down to is, if you don't mind the back and forth and the time, yeah, go ahead and do it for your, on your own. But then what? Then you're going to have to, wait to make sure that filing is successfully filed. And then you have to go yourself to the different website, because it's not like one place where you can, submit the articles. You got to go to the Secretary of State to make sure you're getting a successful filing. Once it's filed, then you have to go to the IRS website to apply and obtain the tax ID number. And then then you're going to have to make sure you draft those corporate bylaws and minutes and the incorporator's resolution. So yes, you can do all this on your own on a do-it-yourself basis. However, it's just more time. And as an entrepreneur starting out, my position is that, in light of how easy it is and how affordable it is to, have a reputable, legal document filing service do it on your behalf, where they're giving you a turnkey package, so the second scenario is, well, what about if they go to someone like us, CorpNet? Well, using someone like us, they're saving all of the time that they would have to spend themselves doing all the research to see what is required to form a corporation or an LLC. We do all of that. We do all the legwork. All we need from them is the name of the corporation, the business purpose, the business address, the registered agent address. If they don't have one, we can act for it. And once we have all that information, we take all of that headache off the end user's plate and we take care of it. And what the client is getting at the end is a turnkey package with their corporation or LLC filed, with their bylaws customized, with their resolutions, with their incorporator certificate. If they're an S corporation, with their S corporation designation. If they, with their tax ID. So all they really have to do is take all of that to their bank and set up the bank account, and then start conducting the corporation. And again, because they're partnered with us, we are, handling all of the compliance filing for them as well. So they don't have to worry about anything. Now, an attorney, I would only recommend an attorney to do any of this when an attorney is required. You don't need an attorney to form corporations and LLCs. I am a JD. I have my Juris Doctorate degree. I don't practice law, but I am an attorney that's not licensed. And when I was practicing, you were charging $2,500 to $5,000 per corporation or LLC. And really, this is the reason why I started my company, is because we wanted to offer something to everyone nationwide, where it's a affordable package, and create this awareness that you can form a corporation or LLC and keep that corporation or LLC in compliance without the help of an attorney. I would recommend the attorney to come into the picture when there's a legal issue at hand. Okay, so God forbid the corporation or LLC is on the wrong end of a legal lawsuit. That's when you need that's when you need the attorney to step in. Or let's say there's multiple shareholders, or there are multiple LLC members, there's a lot of money to be invested. At that point is when you really need that corporation or LLC to hire an attorney to make sure that the corporation's bylaws are really ironclad to protect each and every one of those shareholders, or the operating agreement is really, really ironclad to make sure that every member's rights and their interest within that LLC is protected. But at the end of the day, as you laid it out, anyone can set up a corporation or LLC. It's just kind of, figuring out, do I want to spend all this time, focusing on, all of the legal document filing, stuff of my business, or do I really want to do what I do best, which is really focusing on starting the business, growing it, and leaving all this stuff to someone that I can trust, and that's going to give me that peace of mind that my corporation or LLC is not going to lose its corporate veil.
Yeah, no, that's so helpful. And I've seen people that say, well, I'm just going to save an extra few bucks and I'm going to go do this myself and get those items. But at the same time, as you kind of mentioned, it's more than just going to the state website, filling out the form and getting an EIN. There's bylaws, there is an operating agreement, there is different items that need to be done in conjunction with just opening that entity. And the purpose of these entities, oftentimes there's some tax plays potentially down the road, but just opening an LLC does not save you any taxes. So the main purpose for this is from a legal standpoint, right? Like to have that protection. And so if you're going to create something for protection, but never fully enhance or turn that protection on, like what's the point of having it, right? And so I think that's some of the confusion that people have, is they say, well, the protection is just opening that LLC, where it's, well, that's part of it, but there's so much more that goes along with it that sometimes if you do it on your own, fine, but there's more than what you think. It's just opening up something at the state level.
That is very correct. And that's really where the gist of this conversation lies within, is that it's one thing to just set up a corporation or an LLC, but it's another to make sure that corporation or LLC is set up properly to protect your assets and really create that shield that you're looking for as a business owner, where really that was in the first place why you created that corporation or LLC. And this is such a place where there's so much lack of awareness, because, for example, just the annual meeting minutes for a corporation, it's like, I have so many clients that come up to me and they're like, well, I'm a single man corporation, I'm a one-man corporation, I don't need to draft annual meeting minutes. And that is completely incorrect, because if you're operating as a corporation, you have responsibilities to that corporation, and you may not feel it when everything is honky-dory, but when that legal battle comes up, when that lawsuit comes up, guess what? Those people who are suing you are going to try to do anything and everything to try to punch holes into that corporation, to pierce that corporate veil, and to get to you as the business owner. And that's why it's so critical that even as a one-man corporation, that you literally mark off and check all the boxes off as to what compliance filings and requirements are out there for you, for your corporation, so you make sure that they're all, complied and abided to each year.
Yeah. And one thing that I think I really appreciate, and we talk about this with tax strategy too, right? If you, and I give this example a lot because it's really easy for business owners to understand, the home office deduction as a tax strategy is black and white in the tax code. The IRS explains it. It's not any kind of risky move. But you can take a black and white, completely legal tax code item and turn it illegal just simply by not dotting your I's, cross your T's. And so I always say there's implementation of a tax strategy and then there's correct implementation of a tax strategy.
Exactly.
And
Yes,
if you
that
stop
is
at the
very
implementation, if you stop at the implementation piece and don't do correct implementation, you could be taking a strategy that's completely black and white legal, but making it illegal or making it
Yes.
not able to be defended in court. And so I think that
Very
this
true.
similar line to when we talk about entity structures. Okay, I know we're going to be cutting up on time here, but I want to talk about one other thing that comes up also often with business owners. And I talk to business owners, they say, okay, I heard that I should open up my entity. I'm just going to be a small consulting business, but I heard I should open up my entity in Wyoming or Nevada because they don't have a state tax and I can avoid state taxes by opening up my entity there. And so I'm just going to do that. Even though I live in California, I'm going to open up a Nevada entity and now I won't have to pay any taxes on my business. Can you talk to me a little bit when you're talking to business owners of choosing a state, but then also talking about, what a foreign election does and how that works? Talk to me a little bit about those conversations that you have with business owners from that aspect.
Thank you, Mike. So this is a really, really big one is, when you're excited about starting that business, obviously the first thing you want to do is pick that wild, fun name for your company. And you want to make sure that name is available. But really the second one is, where do I form that corporation or LLC? And general rule of thumb for any business owner trying to form a corporation or LLC is that you're gonna have to form it in the state that you're living in, you're residing in. So the general rule of thumb is set up that corporation or LLC where the members of the LLC or the majority of the members of the LLC will be residing, or the majority of the shareholders will be residing, where the business is going to have its main office or headquarters, where the majority of the employees are, where the servers are located for that company, because we all, have an internet domain name and probably going to have a website. So those are the general rule of thumb when it comes to nexus or having connectivity to that state. And the corporation or LLC would need to set up that business entity within the state that it has the most connectivity or nexus to. Now, let's say that corporation or LLC also does business in a different state, okay? So to keep it very simple, the majority of the shareholders of this corporation live in California, so the corporation is going to be set up in California, okay? However, that corporation or LLC also does business, let's say in Delaware or in Nevada, okay? Well, in Delaware and Nevada, if they're going to be doing business, and when I'm talking doing business, they're going to be, doing a majority of sales that up, over 200,000, or they're going to be having employees within Delaware or Nevada, and they're going to be paying them through payroll. There is enough nexus or connectivity that California corporation that's now there, that domestic corporation has to now foreign qualify in the state of Delaware or Nevada as a foreign corporation doing business in those states, okay? Now, let's say this California corporation doesn't have any, doing business anywhere else, okay? But before they set up, they're all, residing in California, but they're like, you know what? I don't want to set up in California. I hear Delaware is very pro anonymity, and they're really great. Their legal system, I love it. I'm going to go set up in Delaware. But everybody's in California. Well, guess what? Okay, Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming, wherever else, if you are literally a business that the majority of your business, for hypothetically, is in California, but if you go set up in Delaware, Nevada, or any other state other than your home state, you're going to be subjecting yourself to not only Delaware or Nevada or wherever else you form, you're going to be subjecting yourself to those states' taxes in addition to California's taxes. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of myth, hype around Delaware, Nevada, and yes, there are states that don't have a state income tax, but it really boils down to where do you live as the business owner? Where's the majority of your business being conducted? Because if you file in any other state other than where your majority of your business is, chances are you're going to be subjecting that corporation to two states' filings and compliance requirements and whatever else that they're going to need to require to keep that corporation in compliance. So general rule of thumb, if you're set up in the state that you're going to be having the majority of activity going on.
Ah, that is so helpful and just kind of refreshing to kind of hear your point of view, dealing with this on a daily basis. We talk to so many business owners that are hearing different things from different directions and they're just kind of getting thrown around, right? And so they need to find that kind of central place. And, sometimes they're being sold something, so that's why they think they need to go somewhere else. And so that's definitely super helpful. But as you were talking about this, and I think that this makes sense to bring you back for a future podcast episode to really kind of deep dive into this. But, one thing you were talking about was, okay, I'm organized in California as an example, but I have employees in different states and I have nexus in other states. And, I was talking to a business owner the other day and they said, Mike, I'm looking to hire 3 people for my staff. And I said, well, and they're saying they're having a hard time finding someone. I said, well, have you looked, outside of your state, outside of your city, you run a remote business. This would be very easy to hire someone from somewhere else. And their initial reaction was yes, but I haven't done that because I don't want to go down that path. Like, now I need to get different state numbers and I don't know how to do that. And so they were avoiding looking anywhere outside of their home state for talent simply because of fear of having to figure out how to run payroll in those states or, what different forms they would have to file. So talk to us a little bit about how CorpNet really kind of helps in that piece too.
So I'm so happy you're bringing this up because just because you're hiring employees in a different state doesn't make that corporation or LLC or however your entity is being run to foreign qualify within those other states that you're having employees. In fact, a majority of the states don't even require it as a precursor to getting a payroll tax account set up in the state that you're planning to hire employees. So general rule of thumb is, if you have the opportunity where you're a remote company and your talent pool is going to be much more larger and you can hire in another state other than where you're residing, my position on it is go for it because it's just literally setting up for a payroll tax account, which is the state unemployment insurance account and the state income tax withholding account. And then if your state requires any type of local tax filings, and those are all the things that our company CorpNet can assist in obtaining for you, which is called setting up for a payroll tax registration and setting up those payroll tax reg accounts in any of the 50 states. And just because you have employees in another state in and of itself doesn't constitute nexus where you have to now foreign qualify within those states. The general rule is that just by setting up a payroll tax account in those states, you don't really have to foreign qualify. You can simply apply for the payroll tax accounts and run payroll through those payroll tax accounts in other states when you're hiring employees in another state. And this is a big plus because now your talent pool has just it's all 50 states, and for us, even as a company, it's become like it was a nightmare. I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate this, but it's hard to hire talent. It's hard to find talent. And now, we're a hybrid model company where we have some people working in the corporate headquarters and some of us are remote, but as a hybrid based model, where we have both remote and in-office workers, we do have the ability to hire from other states, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to foreign qualify in those other states.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and definitely something I want to dig deeper on with you to help business owners out, because that causes so much confusion and just so much missed opportunities because
Yes.
they just think it's complex. When sure, it might be complex, but it's something that a partner like CorpNet can come in, help make that easy for you, and it's oftentimes a once and done, and then just an annual upkeep or whatever it might be.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so to kind of close out, I know a lot of what we talked about today was compliance, things like that. Kind of close out with just kind of a top list of some of the tips that you have to stay compliant, to make sure, here's some of the things as a business owner. If you have an LLC and you're thinking, am I compliant? What are some of those tips to make sure, like, yes, I'm compliant. I can be reassured that, everything is good from that standpoint.
Sure. So, we're in, right now as we speak, there's a lot of things that are happening, and so, for example, for a corporation, here's a list of everything you need to keep in mind if you want to keep that corporation in compliant. Number one, just make sure you know when your annual filing with the state is required on a yearly basis, because that's first and foremost, because most states will require a corporation to file an annual report. Oftentimes it's every year. Some states it's biannually. So make sure you check on that date. Again, for reference, you can come to the CorpNet website and we have all of the dates for you that we can provide it to you. Another one is just make sure your bylaws are up to date for the corporation. Make sure if you're conducting the business under any other variety or variation of whatever the corporate name is, that you have that corporation file what is called a doing business as filing. If you have made any changes to your corporation, for example, you're no longer at the address, you want to keep the state informed by filing an amendment. Make sure you have a valid registered agent for that corporation. Also, if you are now planning on hiring employees, make sure that you set up those proper state tax accounts, or even if you're charging a sales tax. In addition, if your corporation is conducting business in another state, and there's a majority of business being conducted in other states, including having employees, consider setting up that foreign qualification for your corporation. With an LLC, very similar but much less. One last thing with the corporation, for 2025, if you haven't filed your annual meeting minutes, make sure you draft those. They don't get filed, they just have to be kept along with your bylaws in a corporate folder in your principal place of business. For an LLC, the list is very short, much shorter. With the LLC, generally speaking, it's the operating agreement, and then again, checking to make sure when that LLC's annual report is required to be filed by. And then if in the operating agreement there is a section that requires that LLC to hold an annual meeting and draft annual meeting minutes, then if the LLC operating agreement says that, then you need to again hold that meeting and then draft annual meeting minutes for the LLC. But otherwise, by default, LLCs don't require annual meeting minutes. And then other things to look for is, as I mentioned with the corporation, make sure your LLC is not doing business any other under any variation of the LLC name. Make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed when it comes to hiring of employees. Making sure the state has up-to-date information about your LLC, making sure your registered agent is valid with a physical address. And again, all of these requirements, they're in a checklist. You can download them from our website at www.corpnet.com. We also have a list of all of the due dates by corporation and by LLC that you can download on our website. And then keep in mind that if you're an existing corporation or LLC that wants to become an S Corp, That's another compliance requirement, is that you want to make that election within 75 days of coming into existence as a corporation or LLC, to be able to make that election with the IRS and have the IRS treat you as an S corp for tax purposes for that tax year that you're in. Other than that, that's really the list. And again, you can always download it from our website. We're always here at your service, can assist you with any other questions you have. And, you know, these are just a general list. There may be a ton of other things that you may be looking for, such as like, what if, you know, maybe it's time for me to convert from a corporation to an LLC or from an LLC to a corporation. We can assist with any aspect of the business filings process from A to Z in all of the 50 states.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's been super helpful. And for anyone that's looking to learn more, we have kind of a summary of what we talked about on our blog, and there's a link in the show notes that you can go to that. There's also an area to reach out to CorpNet and get that introduction to them. So Nellie, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. This is, I think, a much needed area for small business owners that sometimes I just think someone's taking care of it. And I think it's important to kind of talk about what are those items that we need. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your information. And thanks for the time today.
Thank you for having me, Mike.